Good afternoon, good evening, whenever this finds you. I'm Andrew Massey. With me in the audience, the Peanut Gallery, is my wife Janelle Massey and my daughter Addison Massey.
Hello.
Hello.
So, just real briefly, my brief is going to be based on the history of Air Force weather as a career field. I'm going to discuss some history of I'm going to establish the basic history of the Air Force so we understand where Air Force weather comes from. First of all, I was just going to point out these two images I have. Obviously, everyone knows the Air Force symbol. Living in this town, you've seen it. This is actually the weather career field badge. This is this little thing on it here with the cups is an anemometer. So that's what helps us measure wind. If you ever see a wind sensor, it's got one of these things at the top of it. Let's see here. Okay, so introduction. We all have the experience of being outside and we hear an aircraft up over our heads, whether it be a jet breaking the sound barrier or a helicopter sometimes, or in recent news, a UFO maybe. Basically, there's a lot that goes into getting that plane up that nobody really knows about. And a big part of that is weather, especially in the military where everything is so, everyone's concerned about asset protection and making sure that we pinch every penny we possibly can. So for the military, they have to have a legal brief for the aircraft to take off. They have to have legal weather, otherwise they cannot fly legally. So I've always been fascinated by it. When I found out it was a possible career path for me in the Air Force, I jumped at it. I did everything I could to get it. It was my number one job, and I did. So I'm very excited to share the history of Air Force weather with you guys. Yes. So just a brief history of the Air Force, just so we have an understanding of how Air Force weather started. Orville and Wilbur Wright set the foundation for flight as we know it on December 17th, 1903 in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. That comes from the Wright Brothers, American Aviators by T.D. Crouch in 1998, published in 1998. After that, the Army creates the U.S. Army Corps based off the Wright brothers and further innovation by the own Army Engineer Corps in aircraft and also flight on July 2nd, 1926. Air Force created on September 18th, 1947. The Army Engineer Corps is split in half basically and separated out as part of the initial structure, creating the first Air Force weather forecasters. Forecasting was part of the Army Engineer Corps. So this part they split in half since the Air Force obviously was going to deal primarily with aircraft. They separated the forecasters out with the Air Force. So, foundation of Air Force weather. National Security Act is signed by President Truman on July 26, 1946, and included is an order to establish an independent Air Force. Part of the Army Engineer Corps, including Army Weather Service, become part of the original Air Force in 1947. Air Force accepts responsibility to provide weather support for the Army, and Army Weather Support becomes Air Weather Service becomes Army Weather Service becomes Air Weather Service, creating the first Air Force weather forecasters. The Air Weather Service still exists. We still use it to this day. It is no longer a military organization. However, it is a governmental organization. And this is all from Warriors in White, Air Force Weather Historian, published in 2003. So significant events. The first tornado warning ever issued in America was issued by the Air Force at Tinker Air Force Base in Oklahoma on March 25th, 1948. Also, this comes from Warriors in White from the Air Force Weather Historian, published in 2003. First in-depth and night infiltration of a hurricane occurs on October 14th, 1948 by a United States Air Force RB-29. It's a big Fortress-type aircraft that I don't believe it's no longer in use, but it's the first time that ever happened was in 1948. There was an Air Force aircraft that did that. Joint Army Regulation 11510 is published, basically calling for Army support weather as a career field for the Air Force. It supersedes old Army Regulation 95-150, and it establishes Army Weather Support as a career field on May 19th, 1945. And this is from American Air Force, Our Heritage. American Air Force Weather, Our Heritage by George Coleman, published in 2012. So, role in military history, Korea. First war the Air Force weather truly took part in. Prepped and produced weather forecasts for reconnaissance, bombing, and rescue missions. Weather also was originally headquartered at 20 OWS in Japan, was Operational Weather Squadron in Japan. It is now headquartered in Korea at the 607th Operational Weather Squadron. At Camp Humphreys, it's at Camp Humphreys, Korea. And in 1994, it was established at the new headquarters for Asia at large. So they control the weather for all of Asia, pretty much. All of our operations in Asia. Air Force continues to have a presence in Korea and Vietnam and supports primarily surveillance missions, as you might expect. So in Vietnam, role in military history of Vietnam, primarily supported bomber and fighter aircraft. Also supported Army aircraft as well, as where Army weather support first really came into focus was Vietnam. Trained South Vietnamese military forecasters along with the other training missions that we were doing over there. and supported cargo and resupply missions to both North and South Vietnam. That's also from the Air Force weather historian Moyers and White, published in 2003. So, from Vietnam to the present day, we primarily support aviation, but also support leadership, staff, and base agencies. For example, the base pool. If you're there with your kids and they've had to get out and be angry because of thunderstorms, sorry, that was us. Grown as a career field, most bases have a weather flight. If not, they are supported by the Regional Operational Weather Squadron. Some of the Operational Weather Squadrons include Scott Air Force Base, Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, Barksdale Air Force Base, Shaw Air Force Base, stateside, and we also have we have one in Germany and one in Hawaii for overseas bases. So day to day, what do? We primarily prepare and produce MEFs, or Mission Execution Forecasts, and 5 days for aviation customers as well as base leadership and base agencies. Primarily in garrison function or on base function is aviation support and asset protection. So the helicopters, if you need shelter helicopters, shelter equipment, shelter cars because of hail, that's us. We're consulted by post leadership when severe weather is forecasted, and we aid in the mitigation efforts. So we brief leadership and they determine how they're going to mitigate snow or hail or whatever the case may be. And also, we are the ones that can give the snow days. That's us. So in conclusion, we are all affected by weather on a daily basis. The military is no different. Weather has played an active role in military history as well as operations. The history of the Air Force is continuing to be written, and it continues to be an essential contribution to the overall Air Force and Army mission. I am honored to be a part of Air Force Weather and carry on its legacy as a proud member of the world's greatest Air Force. Thank you.